Get started. Welcome, committee members and members of the public, to this January 17th, 2024 Governor's Workforce Development Board Executive Committee meeting. For the record, my name is Hugh Anderson, Chairman of the Governor's Workforce Development Board. Katie, will you please take roll call, confirm a quorum, and verify posting?
Sure thing. Thank you. Okay, so we have Chair Anderson.
Here.
Okay, Vice Chair Evans.
Present.
Thank you. Councilman Black. Okay. Crystal Slaughter.
Present.
Thank you. Robert Benner.
Present.
Thank you. Jerry Merritt's right here. So she's joining the meeting, so I'll call her in a little bit. Then we have Scott Hammond. And then Jerry Merritt, can you mark yourself present, please?
Present.
Thank you. Okay. All right, Mr. Chair, Katie Gilbertson, Governor's Office Workforce Innovation. For the record, I hereby affirm that this January 17th, 2024 Governor's Workforce Development Board meeting has reached a quorum. And I further affirm that the agenda and notice for this meeting were properly posted pursuant to Nevada's open meeting law, NRS 241020.
Thanks, Katie. Before we proceed, I'd like to request that anybody who speaks today, please identify yourselves for the record. And continuing on to agenda item number 4, public comments. Members of the public on remote technology are invited to provide comments at this time. No action may be taken on any matters during public comments until the matter itself has been included on an agenda as an item for possible action. Katie, do we have anybody on the telephone or Zoom?
I don't see any.
All right. Moving on to item number 5. Is there any discussion before I call for a motion to approve the November 15th, 2023 Executive Committee meeting minutes? Hearing none, I'll entertain a motion to approve.
Jerry Merritt, for the record, I move that we approve.
Ken Evans, second.
Thank you, Ken. Thank you, Jerry. Any further discussion? All those in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstentions? Please let the record reflect that the motion carries. Moving on to item number 6, for discussion and information only, the chair recognizes Owen Policy Analyst Katie Gilbertson to give a brief update on the WIO estate plan.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Chair. So Katie Gilbertson for the record. This will be pretty brief, but so the WIO estate plan, as you guys remember, the full board voted to approve the draft at our October 18th, 2023 meeting. Since then, it was sent to the governor's office for review for a month. So we got that back in like the middle of December. So after that went to public comment, and it concludes public comment tomorrow. So once the plan wraps up for public comment, it's going to get sent out to the full board members, hopefully by next week, maybe earlier. And after that, the full board is going to vote to approve the final draft at their February 7th, 2023 full board meeting. And then we will work diligently to put it in the Department of Labor portal that is due by March 4th.
Any questions for Katie? All right, hearing none, we'll move on to agenda item number 7. For discussion and information only, the chair recognizes Owen Policy Analyst Katie Gilbertson to facilitate discussion on the Governor's Workforce Development Board strategic plan. The executive committee learned about the difference between the WIO estate plan and the GWDB strategic plan during our last meeting on November 15th. Since the WIO estate plan is nearing completion, we're going to start working on the Governor's Workforce Development Board's first strategic plan. The executive committee plays a pivotal role in the execution of the board's mission, so I would gladly appreciate your input on the initial development of the GWDB strategic plan. Katie, you want to kick it off?
Sure thing. So I'm going to share my screen. Okay, I'll make it a little bit bigger. So this initial draft that we put together is just, these are just the goals, strategies, and measurements from the WIO estate plan. So we just wanted to take the skeleton that we had going from the WIO estate plan and hopefully add some more business and labor voice into it, along with some more concrete like measurements and strategies and stuff like that. That was brought up during the full board meetings, that there's nothing really there's no teeth to the WIO estate plan. But so with this Governor's Workforce Development Board strategic plan, we have more of an opportunity to make more concrete goals and measurements, because we're not going to be tied to any Department of Labor standards or scrutiny with this strategic plan. And the goal for this one is to be more dynamic and flexible to the board's needs and desires and what they want to target for the next upcoming year or upcoming few years. So, and I shared this with you guys too in the email if you want to look at it on your own. But so the first goal that we had from the WIO estate plan was population. So this is to increase engagement with groups who have high unemployment and or low labor force participation rates. Our second goal here was alignment. So the workforce system will increase operational alignment of services among required partners. And the third and last goal that we had in the WIO estate plan was the Nevada workforce system will improve collaboration between required partners through the use of common processes and systems. So you guys can just let me know which page you want to go to, or any thoughts that you have. I was just going to make some comments on this in real time.
Ken, do you want to follow up since you've been instrumental in helping us formulate the thoughts on this?
Yes, thank you, Chair Anderson, and thank you, Ms. Gilbertson. Very quickly, what I anticipate us doing is taking this extract from the compliance-oriented state plan, and as Ms. Gilbertson suggested, we're going to build on this. We wanted to make sure that as we move forward, we did two things. First of all, we didn't have to start from scratch, and then second of all, although the strategic plan will be kind of a standalone effort that, again, we can manage in real time, at the same time, it does need to have some tie to the compliance plan. And the reason why is because there was a concern mentioned that in the past, there may have been some very good positive ideas brought up, but they kind of sat on the shelf with the plan because it was a bit long and unwieldy. So again, the idea is to create a 2 to 3 page document that we can manage in real time meaning from month to month, day to day, et cetera. And again, it'll be a joint effort between the business industry as well as the various reps and contacts from the state agencies that together make up the workforce development system. So what I anticipate is us, similar to how we got the state plan done, I anticipate us forming some type of strategic planning committee, working group or sub-working group, so that we can get into the nuts and bolts of what we want to see. The other thing I'll mention is that Ms. Gilbertson and I made an effort over the past year and a half to talk to other states that either already have a strategic plan in place, or B, they were well on their way to preparation efforts. So we picked up some good lessons learned to include. One of the things that we would hope to eventually see and tie this strategic plan to is some type of public-facing, front-facing dashboard where anyone throughout Nevada could see what we're doing with the strategic plan in terms of coming up with the workforce development system that is more professionally and culturally competent, as I like to say. And this is in 2 key areas. On the front end, providing access and awareness, and then on the back end, making sure that there are impacts and results that help people get employment, but not just any employment, long-term, a career with a livable wage. So that's the plan ahead as we move forward. Again, what we anticipate doing is drafting and picking up with some of the Governor's Workforce Development Board members that have expressed an interest in providing inputs to this, as well as continuing to engage some of the state agency representatives or title department representatives that helped us get to this point. Thank you.
Thanks, Ken. Any other input for Katie or Ken or the committee? And a critique on drilling down to some more specific action items from the WIOA plan. All right, you're an easy group today. All right, let's move on then. We will move on to agenda item number 8 for discussion and information only. The chair will facilitate discussion on the title reports. The executive committee also heard about the title reports during our last meeting on November 15th. Since that meeting, the full board received its first title report presentation with the updated format on December 13th. Given the feedback that was provided both from the GWDB members and title agencies during the full board meeting, there have been ongoing discussions with both parties to work towards a report template that reflects what the Governor's Workforce Development Board members want to see from those reports. I've asked the titles to present updates via email for the next full board meeting on February 7th. And if there's anything that the executive committee noticed from the last reports that they would like to discuss. And just as a reminder, in the discussions we've had with the various title departments and so forth, we recognize that there are certain variances in how things are administered and how things are measured and so forth. And we respect that and understand that and look to accommodate that. But at the end of the day, there are certain fundamentals that we hope to see that we can consistently apply across all the title reports to make it easier to facilitate a dialogue in terms of what the board is seeking in terms of answers to their questions, as well as help the title administrators to feel comfortable that their hard work is being properly represented in that data. So I'll open it up to questions or comments. Bueller, anyone? Okay, well, considering the amount of dialogue that's been going on back and forth between meetings on this subject, I'm kind of surprised at the silence. But that being said, we're going to continue to pursue, finding that common ground to make sure that all parties are being fully, properly represented in terms of the data, and we can do the good work that the mission, the board's mission is looking to pursue. All right. So agenda item number 9 is for discussion and information only, and I'll facilitate discussion on potential Governor's Workforce Development Board onboarding. Onboarding was brought up at the last full board meeting as a way for the full board members to become more familiar with WIOA and the title programs in particular. And again, this ties back to item number 8, where we want to make sure that new board members don't have unrealistic expectations on what the title programs can produce. Board members who have served for a long time will remember that the Department of Labor training from 2021. And I wanted to ask the executive committee if they believe an updated onboard or training session would be useful, and if so, what format would be best. For instance, a manual could be developed with the key bullet points relating to the responsibilities of board members to the Governor's Workforce Development Board, as well as what the different title programs do and how they do it. And then whatever other summary comments, and if that could be put into a summary document that we could share with new board members, that might be an answer. Or there could be an in-person or online training session like we did in 2021 with a recording for future board members that we could archive on the website. So I'll open that up for input and recommendation. Ken, I'll jump back to you for real quickly, because you and I both went through that training together. Your thoughts on having a summary document as compared to doing that again?
I think that we should definitely at a minimum do a summary document. It'll be a new orientation for some of the newer board members, but it'll be a good refresher for some of us that may be a little bit more tenured, but still could use a refresher. What I will say is there was a benefit to doing even if it were virtual, there was a benefit to doing a more personal orientation so that you can ask questions real time. And then also the other value was having some interaction between the board members that had more tenure versus at the time, those of us that were coming in new. So that would be a benefit of having the in-person, whether it was in-person or virtual, actual engagement for an orientation. But at a minimum, definitely we should provide a summary. Those are my thoughts.
Thank you. Anyone else? Well, I will submit that I tend to agree with Ken, especially since in the current configuration, we have a substantial cliff of board members who will expire this year, and we will have a very substantial contingent starting anew at the end of this year. Excuse me. And having a formal onboarding program would be conducive to that number of new board members to help get them up to speed, but also having a summary document to put in their hands with the relevant contact person or people for different title programs for further clarification, I think would be helpful. But one of the goals of the board is to start smoothing out that substantial expiration of board members all at one time and smooth it out so we only have a few departures per year and we can maintain some semblance of institutional memory going through the cycles. Any other comments?
The only other comment I would add is that I would encourage the use of more tenured individuals, even if they're coming off the board or recently came off the board, keep their contact information for a frame of reference and institutional knowledge, as Chair Anderson mentioned. The other thing I would mention is perhaps something we can work on, Chair Anderson, is even if it isn't fully implemented, we can work on some type of staggered terms format. And Ms. Gilbertson, I understand we have to comply with Nevada open meeting law and its related requirements, as well as factor in who does all the board appointments. But that's the only other thing I would suggest. If there's a way to do that, or at least lay the groundwork with that, that may be helpful to those that follow us. Thank you.
Thank you, Ken. All right. Moving on to agenda item number 11 for discussion and information only. The chair recognizes, well, actually, if I understand it, Katie, Jaime is not here, but is Brett Miller on the call?
Yes, Mr. Chair.
Oh, wonderful. So we recognize Strategic Analysis Manager Brett Miller from Workforce Connections to present the Community Investment Impact Dashboard. Welcome, Brett. Appreciate you being here.
Thank you, Chair Anderson. I appreciate the opportunity to show some of the work we've been working on here in the South. And I mean, the goal of some of this work is really just to try to clarify the work we do and communicate the information in a way that the average person can understand, right? We're hoping that it helps drive transparency and the ability for all the people in our community and our stakeholders to look at our data and understand what's going on and provide meaningful feedback. I'm going to go ahead and just kind of tear into the presentation here. And
for those of you who I see on the screen looking askance, I did make a mistake and skipped number 10. So if Bob and Elaine, my apologies. We're looking forward to hearing from you. Go ahead, Brett.
I don't mind going first. So, Katie, can you verify that you can see my screen?
Yes,
The dashboard?
Yep.
You can? Okay, and I see Ken shaking his head also. Okay, so what we put together here was it's an interactive dashboard that's available publicly on our website. And like I said, it's designed to communicate information hopefully in an understandable way, because our programs can be really complicated. We have a lot of acronyms, and it's easy to get lost in all the 2-quarter, 4-quarter exits and all of that stuff. So to start with, we loaded up 4 years of financial data from our subrecipients and the providers, and what that gives us is the what the actual dollars we've spent on different items. Think how much we've spent on just a total investment. So over the last 4 years, I have $77.5 million worth of investment represented in this data set, with 22.5 million representing classroom training for people that have been around WIOA. That's primarily ETPL trainings, eligible training providers. And then we paired it with the information out of our state MIS, which represents 12,800 individuals that we've served or are currently serving. And then we added outcomes to put a flavor to what are we getting out of that $77.5 million? How many people employed does that represent? Or what percentage of success do we have? You'll see just overall that under each one of these major headings, we've attempted to put the information, summarize what it is in an understandable way. So hopefully most people can understand what we're talking about. I'm going to run down through the data here just real quick. Over the last 4 years, $77.5 million in investment, $22.5 million spent on classroom training, another $1.2 million on the job training. Those individuals often require support services. Most often it's help with transportation. So we spent another $3.8 million on primarily things like gas cards or bus passes. For youth, there's a component of the program that requires work experience, and we invested $6.14 million in work experience, primarily on youth. And and all these services require people to implement. So, there's a considerable investment in the people that staff these career centers, the employee and V hubs, and that's $32.3 million. And then, like most businesses, there's operational costs like accounting, some of the management, and some overall overhead. Now, for that, we've served 12,800 individuals. Those individuals have generated so far a pool of $186 million in wages annually. When we look at how their employment panned out, we're looking at 58% employed in the second quarter. That's roughly 6 months after they leave our program. 46% in the fourth quarter, roughly a year after they leave our program. A credential rate of 71%, primarily associated with this classroom training over here. And then if you calculate a simple return on investment, which we just define as if we were to take the annualized wages and calculate how long would it take to pay back the investment of this $77.5 million, it works out to 5 months, right? Which is a pretty good return on investment. So there are a lot of filters on this to enable to enable anyone to go in and look and hopefully see what they want to see. I'm going to look at a program year that we most recently finished, which was program year 22. So I click on program year 22, the whole analysis updates. So for the individuals in that finished in that program year, $22.7 million invested with a return of 3.4 months, 79 million, and employment at about 75 to 76%. And right there, I'm going to take kind of a quick stop and ask if there's anything anyone would like to see. Okay.
Yeah, just maybe if you could sort, only because I'm sorry, Vice Chair Evans, for the record, maybe since I see it, if you could maybe sort it by either a commissioner or a city council person, just as an example, unless you're already planning to do that.
Sure. So first thing I'm going to do is just kind of hit, I'm going to look at the ADW funding stream. So you see it updated to $17.8 million. We're still in the same program year. I want to look at a county commissioner here. And I'm going to go ahead and pick a county first, because I have commissioners for some of the north in this database and also commissioners for some of the south. So I'm going to go to Clark County. So that's our total investment for Clark County. Then if I look at individual commissioners, I can pick out Marilyn Kirkpatrick, $2 million in the area that she represents. Or let's go to William McCurdy, because he's actually one of our local elected officials that helps govern our board. $2.84 million investment, 421 individuals, $10 million in wages for that program year, and a return of 3.4 months on that money. Now, likewise, I can go in here and I can look at an individual city. For example, we have on our local elected officials, we have representation from North Las Vegas, Henderson, and Boulder City. So I'm just going to hit North Las Vegas here and pick on Scott, even though I don't think was present today. And for North Las Vegas, there was $390,000 invested, 65 completions, $2 million, with a good return. Now, if we step back, there's a lot more information that we gather other than just locality information. This right here is basically all geography type information. We can go over here and we have filters so we can look at other items, right? I have area locations so we can look at state assembly, state senate, congressional districts, high school zones. I mean, these are things that I often get questions about, right? Zip codes. A lot of people like to see things in zip codes because they have a favorite zip code. So for example, 89031, which I know is a high need zip code here locally, $630,000, 100 individuals, 84%, 79% high credential rate. The results look pretty good.
Brett, for the record, this is Hugh
Yes, sir.
Anderson. These are the funds only administered by Workforce Connections, correct?
It is. This right here is Workforce Connections Title I funding. I should have clarified that to begin with. And then there are, in some instances, for example, the The NEG funding is incorporated in here because it's available in our MIS system. And there are some other funding streams that will be added to this in the future because I have the participant data and the outcomes.
Thank you.
Chair Anderson.
Yes, sir.
Ken Evans for the record. Excellent, Brett. And a couple of questions. First question is there the ability, or have you already laid the groundwork for a tie between your system and how you're collecting this impact information and the Empower system that we hope to have in place eventually?
So, Mr. Chair, through you, the answer to that, I think, would be the Empower system primarily is for research. I do have a log on to go in and look at that type of information. To the extent that I think that it would be possible, I would be willing to help develop the same sort of tools against that data. I'm not sure if as far as the financial information, I don't think, currently, I don't think there's a way for me to push that information up, which is about the only information that I have that Empower doesn't have, as I understand it at this point in time.
Okay, so I'm also planting some seeds for my follow-up question is, going back to one of the conversations we had when we were developing the state plan, and we talked about the fact that in the barriers committee, once again, for the record, we know there's 3 subgroups. There's African-American males and Latinx males in the North, African-American males in the South. We know that there are individuals that may have some type of disability. And then last but not least, we also know that single parent households, predominantly led by women with infant or school-aged children. We know we have those challenging populations. So where I'm going with this very quickly is, if we just come back to the first one I mentioned, what I'm seeing here is we could go into this system or what you presented here, and if we ask, for example, David Smith, give us an update of where the young African-American males are coming from in the South, or the Latinx males in the North, what zip codes are they coming from, or what areas are they coming from? We would be able to tie to this to see, again, going back to the conversation we had, are we already putting resources there? And from a standpoint of, we need to put even more resources there, as well as determine the ROI or how well we're doing. I'm kind of getting into, it looks like your system will help us do some of those analysis, as well as figure out ways to pivot and identify additional resources where necessary.
That is the hope.
Okay.
That, right. And for example, that the data set behind this is just one view on that data. It's possible for me to look at it in a way that would be more similar to that dashboard that David created, which I believe is live now. So you could see a cross-section comparison, for example, in bar charts of what different races and ethnicities or genders or even the zip codes they're from in an interactive fashion.
Yeah, and forgive me, Mr. Chair, my last comment, because I see Mr. Hammond has his hand up as well. The reason why I brought up the Empower is because the idea behind the Empower is to have a longitudinal resource capability to track people in a manner that the public can't see who it is as an individual. That's mass. But at the same time, in terms of the system, we'll have a way to figure out whether it's at the second quarter after, the fourth quarter after, or even the sixth quarter after, how they're doing. So I'm just kind of thinking ahead or planting seeds for potentially where this could go if we figure out ways to tie all the systems together. Thank you, Mr. Miller, and thank you, Mr. Chair, for allowing me to ask that.
Mr. Hammond.
Yeah, thank you. There's a lot of information. I could probably spend hours and hours, maybe even days on this right here. But the question I have, when you were going over one of the categories, you stated something about an ROI, 3.4 months. And I just wanted to see, before I start diving into this, I wanted to see what the correlation was. How is that read? How do you use that? So you said something like $2 million spent in an area, and an ROI at 3.4 months. What can you break that down for me and explain how what the correlation is there? So I can, as I'm reading it later on, I understand that.
Yes. Okay. So I hope that this is clear, but I hit it like really quick. So if we were to take the annualized wages and pay back the total investment, $68.4 million would pay back $16.8 million in 2.9 months.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yep. Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you. I didn't see that. I didn't get a chance to read all of the fine print. Thank you.
That's all right. There's a lot here, and I really enjoy the chance to show off the work.
Brett, this is Hugh Anderson again.
Thank
So
you.
Is that math as simple as dividing the 68.4 million by the 16.8? Because that comes out to north of 4, a little over 4, which is not a huge difference, but what's going into the math to get to that 2.9?
So the actual formula is 16.8 divided by 68.4, and that will give you the fractional amount of years, right? And so then I have to multiply that by 12 months to put it in terms of months.
Got it. Thank you. Any other questions for Brett? Anything else you want to spotlight, Brett?
I don't think so. I just hit just some of the other things we have here. So we covered some barriers. Really, a lot of these are the most common ones that we see with the individuals entering our system. Demographics, locations with partners, the individual hubs, and then of course some of the other things that really don't fit into a nice, neat category. And then the last thing I would like to point out is we have a draft version of this that's being reviewed by the North that has 4 years of financial data loaded up along with their participant information. So if all goes well, the tool will be available for the Northern board also.
Excellent. Would you make sure that Katie has the link to this that she can circulate to the committee?
I will.
And I'm about to tell tales out of school, and correct me if I'm getting this wrong, Brett. This entire exercise, this dashboard that you're seeing with all the incredible data and so forth, was done on Brett's own initiative. His executive team did not know he was working on this in his spare time, and it just shows number one, his powerful expertise over Excel and being able to draw in all this data and then producing a very usable piece of software for us to glean information that we so desperately seek. So Brett, kudos to you for your initiative and pursuing this. Great work.
Thank you for the kind words.
Chair Anderson?
Yes, sir.
Yep. I echo what you just mentioned. Thank you very much, Brett. And then what I wanted to ask, if it's not too late, it would be great, Ms. Gilbertson, if we could figure out a way for Brett to do this presentation or a summary of it before our barriers and underserved populations meeting. If not the next one after that. But it'd be great if we could figure out a way to fit it in for this next one. Again, thank you very much, Brett. This is outstanding.
Thank you, Mr. Evans, and I would be more than happy to do another presentation.
Do you have any other questions or comments for Brett?
Mr. Chair, Katie Gilbertson, just one quick clarification. The Empower title report dashboard is not up yet, but it'll be up soon, I think within the quarter, just to clarify.
Thank you, Katie. Keep us posted because we're all hanging on with bated breath to see that. All right. Moving back to agenda item number 10 for discussion and information only, the chair recognizes Deputy Director Bob Potts and Director of Workforce Development Elaine Silverstone with Governor's Office of Economic Development to present on the updated in-demand occupations list. Thank you for your indulgence for letting me hop around the agenda, both of you.
No, so for the record, Bob Potts, I'm so pleased to be part of this, and I'm kind of glad you skipped that around, Brett. That's amazing work. Get a chance to say that on the record. I think what you've done is pretty great. So kudos to you and the support that you bring to the table here. So anyways, it's a real pleasure to be here for both Elaine Silverstone and I. I'm going to share my screen, and if this doesn't work, I am going to let Katie punt. I'm going to punt it over to her. So let me know if. Can you see this?
Not yet, Bob. Yeah, yes.
Did it
Yes.
show up?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, very good. All right. Well, I appreciate Director Hammond and Katie for inviting me to be part of this committee meeting here to talk a little bit about economic and workforce development, and a very close correlation there is between the two of them and the work that we're doing in our office with the Governor's Office of Economic Development and with the Governor's Office of Workforce Innovation. You cannot separate these two. They're inextricably tied. We can't do our work without workforce development, and workforce development has to have and work with us as well. So what I want to do, and I thought this would be helpful, is to have kind of a higher level conversation to talk a little bit of the context of how we see our state's economy, its structural dynamics, and its unique characteristics, and how that has and how that rolls forward and sets the tone for the workforce we need both now and in the future. I'm going to use our strategic plan that was released last March as a way to kind of talk about this, is because it's our strategic plan, how we're moving forward, and the support that we're going to need for workforce development and education going forward. I'll talk a little bit about the state of the economy, because you kind of got to know where you're at to kind of talk about where you're going and have a sense of where you've been as to why we have put together a strategic plan and the elements that are in it. And I'll talk about that a little bit. A lot of times folks talk about economic development and economic growth as though they're one and the same. And although they are inextricably tied as well, they're different. Growth talks about change over time. Economic development talks about how that change happens, and being able to be actively engaged in that process so that we can strategically grow our state and its regions to their highest and best potential. I will talk a little bit about the trends, the historical trends we've seen, to talk about reasons why we've made the decisions we've made, and how we've structured our strategic plan. And then I want to talk a little bit about the pandemic and that downturn in the economy and all of the things that happened during that, and how it really changed the nature of work and it structurally changed our economy. And I think for the most part, for the state of Nevada, it's created a pretty great opportunity for us in ways that have yet to be fully realized. So I'll talk about that a little bit as well. At the end of the day, this is talking about how we affect everything we think about economic development, and how that sets our priorities, our opportunities, and our challenges going forward. So I'm going to start with this here. Again, this is our state plan, and this is just a high-level overview. The title of it is Realizing Nevada's Electric, Innovative, and Connected Future. It's a 5-year comprehensive economic development strategy. The acronym CEDS, that goes back to the Economic Development Administration. We really wanted something that was CEDS compliant so that anybody in the state could apply for EDA grants, Economic Development Agency grants, and use the state plan to check the boxes that they met those requirements for those grant applications. Essentially, the bullets that you see in here are I've just basically taken the index out of here so you can see the content of what's in the state strategic plan for economic development. And then I'll use this as kind of a guidepost as I kind of go through my presentation here. We have recently updated the SEDS plan. I said it was released in March, but we just made a recent update to it because we wanted to add the health and the water sectors to it as well, along with information technology, logistics and operation, natural resource technologies, hospitality and tourism, as well as advanced manufacturing. So we have our 5 main economic development and target sectors, and then we've got these supporting ones that we have to key on in order to realize the work that we want to do with our specific economic development target sectors. At the end of the day, this was something that was put together with a pretty broad group of stakeholders, especially on the assessment section, that economic and community assessment, and as well as the support that came. This was commissioned with SRI, Stanford Research Institute. They were the ones that did a lot of this work, so they were able to bring in, kind of their Ivy League expertise in this. But we brought in a lot of other folks into this to help make this kind of a cohesive and all persons on board strategic plan. I probably won't talk too much about the last 2 bullets on this, and I'll probably end at the strategy and action so that I can move right into talking about the in-demand occupations, which is kind of the topic on this agenda item and what everybody wanted to get to. But I really wanted to talk about this because this sets a context of why we did what we did with the in-demand occupations and how they can be used in coordination with all the players at this call and the work that we're doing with OWN as well. When we talked about the strategic plan, a lot of it came to looking at our comparative advantages in the state. Our proximity to California can't be understated, and the opportunity to the 5th largest economy and what that means for us can't be understated. The folks I worked with would state it this way: most states would crawl over broken glass to have that opportunity that we have in the state of Nevada, and we've seen a huge advantage because of that and providing the right place for companies to land. We really focused a lot and made sure that we continue to include both our historical industries, mining and the tourism, so that they were still recognized throughout the whole strategic plan, and then all within the constraints. And these are the major constraints that came out that we were addressing in this, like land, having available land. That's a big issue for us, even though there's so much open space. It's all federal land, and working with that. Water conservation, and then the last one. So it's land, water, and workforce, and I'm going to approach you on that. All right, so going to the data, and I'll move through this fairly quickly. Nevada's, our economy always has higher highs and lower lows than the national average, and we are very pro-cyclical. So when things are good, they're really good, and when they're bad, they're not very good at all. So if you go back and you look at what we were pre-Great Recession, 1.3 million workers, we dropped to 1.1. It took us 10 years to get to the pre-pandemic peak. And then in a matter of 6 weeks, we lost all those jobs down to 1.1 million workers again, in an effort to keep people safe during the pandemic there. It took us till June of 2022 to get to the pre-pandemic level again, and we're currently now about 133,000, a little over that, 134,000 jobs above the pre-pandemic peak. But the jobs is 457,600 additional jobs is a very different industry mix than it was prior to this. And a lot of that has been driven by the pandemic. When you think about consumer purchase behaviors, the way people stream entertainment, having meetings like this over Zoom that weren't the norm as much as they are now. There's been a whole change in things. And if you think being next to the 5th largest economy of in the world, and all those goods have to flow eastward from the Pacific Rim, gives Nevada a huge opportunity to be part of that and to build on that opportunity. And that's what we're really seeing. I'll talk about that in a bit. All I did here is I just indexed jobs just to talk about the higher highs and the lower lows. So in the red there, that's the US jobs, and the blue is Nevada jobs. And there you see higher highs and lower lows. So when things are good, they're really good. And quite frankly, that's the place and the space that we find ourselves in right now. I regularly, there's a great think tank that's in Arlington, Federal Funds Information for States. They do a quarterly report where they look at, they call it the State Index of Economic Momentum. And it's pretty interesting to see where we're at right now. So if you go back to the first quarter of 22, and then this is quarter by quarter, we were number 1, then we were number 4, number 11, number 15, number 4, number 4, number 8, and then the last quarter of last year, we were back at number 6. What that says, so what they're doing is it's a consensus, it's rolled together, it's an index that looks at population, jobs, and income. Okay, and where we fit in it. So in the most recent quarter, we were number 20 on income, we were number 1 on job growth, and we were number 19 on population growth. But just seeing where we change in the rank of that goes again where we keep falling around the national average. And so big part of economic development is thinking about diversification. How do we diversify our economy so that we are not so subject to these normal business cycle trends? And it's happening, but it's happening differently in different regions of the state. And that diversification is a huge effort on the part of the Governor's Office of Economic Development and the Regional Development Authority partners that we work with. One of the ways that we can look at where we're at right now on this map here, this is just this is the old Hochman Index, and essentially it's a measure of diversification. If you had a Hochman Index of 100, that would mean every slice of your industrial pie would be exactly the same size. Okay, and if you look at our competing states of Utah, Arizona, and Colorado, you can see where they're much more diverse than we are, and they're all. We're looking at the same 4 top targeted sectors here. You can see where we're well behind, with Utah being at 95.6%, Arizona at 96.4%, Colorado at 93.8%, and there we're at 74.5%. Okay, so creating an industry, a target industry, and an industry mix and industry clusters that help support target sector industries is a key goal of what we're trying to do with economic development. But as I mentioned, it's regionally, it's interesting in our state. And so this is looking at each of the counties in the state. And you can see here why the Northern Nevada, Washoe County, they survived much better during the during the COVID downturn than even Clark did, even though 67 to 70% of the jobs are in Clark County, where it's almost 90% diversified, and Clark's at 64%. That's when you have that much of the state in Southern Nevada, that affects the whole state when you're just looking at just the state numbers. That's why you have to break it down and look at the different regions. That's why the whole regional development authority structure in the state is so effective, and why we're able to do things, because they can be boots on the ground. They know their regions, and they can approach them strategically in different ways that's appropriate. What's interesting, if you note here, most of the rural counties have a very, very low diversity because they're so driven by mining. Okay, now mining's been really good in the state, and and we're just so fortunate and blessed to have what's going on with the critical mineral space, because a lot of that is in the rural communities as well. And so you've got both precious metals as well as critical minerals. So it's creating an opportunity, and at some level a diversification within an industry. So let's talk a little bit about these structural differences, and I won't talk a lot about. I won't go in the weeds too much on this one. This is shift share analysis, which is a very academic term for kind of an easy concept, and I'm going to try to explain it. And hopefully, it comes across as understandable here. What I want to do is focus more on the numbers than the chart, and then it'll make more sense. But essentially, you need to think about it this as a rising tide lifts all ships. Okay, so if you're on the table there, the first column, those are the different target sectors we were focused on through this 12-year period. We don't have the 2023 data yet. So for this 10-year period from 2012 to 2022, there's a job change for each of those sectors over that period. And then what we want to do is look at the expected growth that's explained by national growth, so overall national economic growth and national industry growth specific for each of these industries. So you take the job change, you subtract out what was expected on both those parameters in the third column, and then that second from the right column, that's the difference. And if that number is positive, that means we're more competitive in these industries than the national average, which is really great for us. Now, you'll see at the very bottom, there's one industry where we lost ground, and we know this, right? We've seen gaming move to reservations. We've seen it move to offshoring of gaming. There's a whole host of reasons, but we've seen it shrink. I was looking at recent numbers where on the job numbers statewide, 26% of the jobs were in the tourism industry in 2017. Now it's at 20%. So there's a shift that's going on in this industry, and it could be automation. There's a whole host of reasons here. But the other thing that I want to point out is the earnings here. You can also see that the one where we lost the most ground pays the least. So at the end of the day, we're bringing resiliency into the economy by diversifying it, but we're creating economic capacity as well for the workers here and creating career path opportunities. That's the goal. But you can see again, when we're talking about workers and we're talking about economic development, this is an inextricable tie between economic and workforce development, and why you need to think about them in those terms. And so there's a cohesive economies of scale as we're kind of going through this. You know, one of the things I like to say, we just don't have enough capacity to do all the good work that needs to be done. I mean, just state government alone. We have a government the size of Delaware and 3 times as many people to serve. That's a challenge, right? And so we have to be efficient. We have to work together. And again, I appreciate you inviting me, you know, Elaine and I to be part of this conversation. So, okay, so here's the same analysis, and this is for Southern Nevada. So this is Clark County. I'm going to go back. And you can see that the top sector for growth in both Nevada and Southern Nevada is logistics and operations. That's not unexpected because of the pandemic and what happened with that, because everybody was buying from Amazon or Zulily or these kind of places. And so that created an opportunity for all this flow of goods, not only to Nevada, but through Nevada. Okay. And so, and people say, well, who wants warehousing and transportation jobs? You need to remember we have a pattern language that happened in the Reno Sparks MSA, where in the mid 2000s, you could almost see a one-to-one change in the drops in tourism jobs were replaced by transportation and warehousing jobs. Those transportation and warehousing jobs, these companies decide we're going to do just basic manufacture, assembly manufacturing, which rolls into advanced manufacturing, that rolls into technology and research and development. So there's this whole trail that happens as you kind of evolve down through this process. Many times that takes years. We've seen things compressed into a matter of just a few years that would generally take decades to have these kind of changes. So I think it's an opportunity for us to do some pretty good things. Like I say, we have the wind at our back. We just need to put the sails up at some level here. Okay. Northern Nevada, you can see here that the top industry is natural resource technologies. And a lot of that goes back to this whole lithium loop that everybody talks about and what's going on in there. I mean, Nevada is really the only state that has bookend to bookend from extractive mining all the way to final demand auto manufacturing with a Tesla semi. We just signed a contract with them Friday, excuse me. So that's all moving forward. Plus we have recycling with companies like Redwood Materials and Aqua Metals, a big opportunity there. And if you go all the way across, you can see those jobs pay really, really well. And there's quite a few of them. So
pardon me, Bob.
Yep, jump in.
Ken Evans for the record. Real quick question. The
Sure.
earnings per worker, is that an average amount, or I guess I'm trying to get a feel for, you know, for example, if you read the newspaper sometime, there's individuals that, I'll just use Amazon, not to pick on them, but they question the amount that Amazon is paying. So going back to the other number that I saw a few minutes ago for Southern Nevada, again, I asked, is that earnings per worker an average number, or what type of number is that?
Yeah, so it would include everybody in that industry. So it would be the same thing as taking us, you know, just one company, let's take and weighted average of this. So it includes everybody. The other thing I should add on that, Ken, is that the earnings per worker, this includes benefits too. So it's not just their hourly wage or just their salary. This includes benefits as well. Okay, that's where that number comes from.
Okay, thank you. And just very quickly, from my standpoint, still a positive thing, because what it's suggesting is that for those industries that we're looking at, even the people that may be on the lower end of the pay scale are still probably doing better than in some of the traditional industries average. So,
Exactly,
so
because
good.
yeah, so Bob Potts again. So yeah, this, because it is the average of the population of that industry population, it includes everybody in there. And it does create an opportunity for upward mobility. You know, you brought, and I'm just going to do a quick aside here if we have time to do this. We talked to the Amazon folks a while back, and quite frankly, they're ecstatic about the opportunity there because of the quality of workforce Southern Nevada has, and the opportunities that it created when folks didn't have a position because we shut down a lot of the properties, keep people safe. But these folks, they showed up, they didn't mind working swing shift, they didn't mind those kind of things. And so it created opportunities for folks that may not have happened otherwise. That's just a side anecdote here. Okay.
Bob, this is Hugh Anderson. Just a quick
Sure.
add-on to Ken's question. So do you have access to things like median wages and actual cash compensation relative to benefits and the like?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
thank
Yeah.
you.
And you know, the thing is, so people ask me a lot of time when it comes to point statistics, do you like the mean? Do you like the mode? Do you like, you know, the mean or the average or the same thing? Do you like the mean? Do you like the mode? Do you like the median? And there's a place for all of those. The challenge I have with the median is it's a middle number. That's a 50th percentile, right? And if you've got a huge skew in your curve of high paid, low paid people, all of a sudden you might be missing a whole, you know, a large number of people because you just took the 50th percentile. What I prefer is the weighted average so that every person counts. It's redistricting. Every one vote, one person, one vote, right? So everybody gets weighted in. So that's what these would be the equivalent of, is the weighted average.
Makes sense. Thank you.
Yep. All right. So this one I didn't have a new slide to update it with, but it's not that old. The latest numbers, the job numbers in November, so the story hasn't changed that much. But I wanted to bring this up to kind of make a point about what's happened, you know, because of the pandemic, because I think it's really interesting here on how it's changed and how it's accelerated diversification, and there's just a natural diversification that's actually happened. So let me explain this horizontal bar chart here. The red jobs reflect the number of jobs that were lost from February 2020 to May 2020. Okay, so a 6-week period. The blue bar reflects the number of jobs that have been gained back from May 2020 to September 2023. Okay, so if the blue bar is longer than the red bar, you get a green label. Okay, that means you're net positive. Okay, so you can see the total non-farm jobs between February 2020 and 2023 were 19,500 jobs above the pre-pandemic peak. Okay, there's a number, and I know these labels are really small and they're hard to read. That's why I pulled out a couple of these here. So the first red one, see, that's accommodation and food services. We're still down 300 jobs from the pre-pandemic peak. But professional and business services is up almost, you know, 27,000 jobs. Transportation, warehousing, and distribution there, it's up almost 20,000. Construction's up 14,000. Manufacturing's up 10,000. And so you're seeing this is the difference. This is a structural difference in those additional jobs that have been gained back since a pre-pandemic peak, just because the pandemic structurally changed a lot of our economy, which is in our best interest. But what it means, especially when you start talking about workforce development and education, you're kind of trying to catch up. Thank goodness there's a lot of companies out there that they're kind of picking up the slack and everything else. And some of the positions aren't necessary, you know, it's more credentialing, things like that. But it's certainly is something for us all to really be aware of as we go forward here. Okay. Yeah, sure.
Ken Evans for the record. To that end, where would a computer, let's see, someone with a computer science degree, or maybe a computer programmer or coder might be, where would they fall in? Professional services?
Well, Mr. Evans, that's a hard question to answer because technology touches everything. right? It's in advanced manufacturing, it's in healthcare, it's across the board. So those occupations would drivel all the way through all of these other ones, right? But what you're going to see is there's going to be a preponderance in some of the, in some of these and others. And hopefully, as I go through this, it'll kind of pull this out, and you can kind of see where how this works, and how the analysis works, and the crosswalks I'll talk about in a little bit. And so, like a computer technology person, healthcare is so much easier because nurses fit in one industry, pharmacists fit in one industry, doctors fit in one industry. But when you start, and machinists, they fit into manufacturing, things like that. But when you start talking about somebody that's a web developer like Mr. Miller, right, and he does these sort of things, he could work at some, professional and business services with Workforce Connections but he could also work at a hospital, right? And so it's never quite straightforward, and that's why the analysis that went into this in-demand occupations was pretty robust.
Okay, and I may be Ken Evans for the record, I may be ceding a future part of this presentation, but where I'm kind of going with this is the ability to see, at one point in time, we had tens of thousands of vacancies in the area that I mentioned. And so the ability to tie that to the industries we're trying to move into, diversify into, so we can make sure that we keep our focus on where we need to be developing people to continue to diversify the economy is helpful. Thanks.
Absolutely. So, and those kind of occupations, every one of our target sectors needs those people. I can just tell you that when we start looking at the gap analysis that's part of this, they'll show up, and they could be in advanced manufacturing, they could be in healthcare, right? Whatever. So, all right, let me move on here a little bit. So this is a slide I showed a little bit earlier. This is the index of our state plan. I'm not going to spend much time here just to kind of get everybody where we're at right now, because I do want to get to the workforce side of things and the in-demand occupations. So talked a lot about the assessment side of things. I'm going to go and talk a little bit about the SWOT analysis, as well as our strategy and action plan. But what I really want to go in more than anything is to start focusing on workforce development and the in-demand analysis. So we'll get there. Other questions before I go there? All right. So here's the SWOT analysis, the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. This is what they came up with after all the assessment, all the stakeholder meetings, everything that we'd been working on. And so when we talk about the strengths, the quality of life, our low taxes, there's that proximity to California again that shows up. Natural resources, what's going on in the critical mineral space, and some of the strengths is just in 10 years the diversification that we've seen this for. Weaknesses, some of these shouldn't be a surprise to anybody. Education is always a challenge, because if you don't have it, you can't do economic development. But so many times it lags because it is a public good that depends on growth in order to be able to finance it. Right. And so it's always, there's always these chicken and egg things that go in there. But you can see number 2 on here, workforce development, kind of falls in on that. Infrastructure, and I'll bring this out a little bit when I start talking about the 3 verticals, the strategic verticals that we have in our state plan, what we're really focusing on. Other things, I talked a little bit about the fiscal structure, size of Delaware, 3 times 30 people to serve, and then the land issue. Opportunities, huge amount of opportunities when we start talking about these new tech jobs, onshoring, and opportunities, especially in the innovation and entrepreneur space. There's a lot that goes on there. Transportation, whether it's highway, rail, or air, and whether it's passenger or freight. So Brightline is a huge thing that happened to us. I think that's really, really helpful. Okay. And then the last one here, the startup and entrepreneurship system. I'm going to do a call out to AB 77 out of the last legislative session, Office of Entrepreneurship, which is now part of the Governor's Office of Economic Development. We're getting that stood up. We are the only state to do something like this. So I think that we're going to see some really great things coming out of that as we try to bring the whole innovation, entrepreneurship, the startup, that whole ecosystem into a cohesive movement to get some great things done. The threats, again, the pro-cyclicality of our economy and the exposure to economic cycles, Competition, I showed you the map. The cost of living and stagnant wages. Now that has kind of shifted a little bit. There's been some wage appreciation that's been really positive news over the last year. So we're kind of helping with that. And of course, climate change and water scarcity. And these are the three verticals. So when we talk about Electric Nevada, that's a whole EV supply chain, the whole lithium loop, everything we talk about that. But everything, all the opportunity that it creates across the state, and it's not just confined to northern Nevada or the mining in rural parts. It's the whole state, and all the different things that get tied to that. The support of the completion of the utility connectivity and the build out of the EV infrastructure. The Innovative Nevada, that's the other one I was alluding to here a little bit. We're doing a lot of kind of great things in this whole space, but it's not very cohesive. And that's why I think the Office of Entrepreneurship and everything that's going on with that is really pretty helpful. And I don't want to underscore what's going on with National Science Foundation's Engines grants and everything that's tied to those, as well as the tech hubs and being awarded the tech hub grants. That brings everybody together, and just those grants and the requirements of those grants forces the private sector, the public sector, education, workforce development, everybody, all hands on deck to help with those. And the innovative side is also to really lead globally on water scarcity policy and innovation. We get high marks in there, and I think that we can really set the stage for that. I told you earlier, we're throwing water in as a new sector. Not only are we putting it in as a sector, we're taking a deeper dive on the policy side of things. So when it comes to economic development and water, that we're really a national leader in economic development as driven by water policy. So that's part of what we're looking at. The Connected Nevada, that all ties to transportation and our, and taking advantage of things like being next to California, things like that. And it has to do with railroad, but it also has to do support the expansion of broadband and 5G infrastructure. So I've gone on a long time talking about economic development and our state plan and everything that we're doing in there, but it kind of is important to have that whole context to understand how workforce development fits into that whole ecosystem and the importance that everybody on this call has in helping have a cohesive effort going forward for the end game, which is opportunity for folks. Okay. Our procyclical economy, I talked about that and how it leaves us vulnerable. The regions of the state are diversifying, but at different rates. We can see the difference between what's happening in northern Nevada, southern Nevada, and rural Nevada. I talked about the pandemic and how it's accelerated opportunity. I talked about those three strategic verticals that we have, and then these constraints. These are the big ones that we deal with, right? Water, land, and workforce. And so with the workforce one, I'm going to start by going into the in-demand occupations by saying this, because again, the tie to economic and workforce development is it great companies that grow a great workforce, or is it a great workforce that grow and attract great companies? And the answer to both those questions is yes. Right. And so if we can do our part in coordination of growing a great workforce, then we can continue this really positive trend we have going forward. So I'm going to go into this section, and this is the in-demand occupation side of things. This often gets started. So this goes back to 2016 when I was the research director before I stepped in to be deputy director in the agency. And sitting here thinking, okay, what would be the most important thing we could do to accelerate diversification in the state? And over again, when we looked at this survey that was done by Site Selection Magazine, it was always workforce development and education that was always at the top of the list. If you get this right, you can move a lot quicker than a lot of the other things that are on this list. Okay. And any company will tell you that their greatest joy and their greatest sorrows is human resources. If you get the human resources right, you can do a whole lot of things. What's interesting, so this is a 2023 survey results that came out in October. And this is the first time over the last decade where I've not seen workforce development being in number 1, number 2, and number 3 place. It's in number 2 and number 6 here. That's why I put this slide here in. This was what it was last year. Workforce skills, workforce development. That's right. And then it goes to the other ones. You know, you got to have a good state and local tax scheme. That's why in Nevada over California, Nevada wins, right? The transportation infrastructure. That's why we're talking about Connected Nevada. The permitting and regulatory procedures really points out why Governor Lombardo was really trying to push on helping on that front. The land, I talked about land as being one of our restraints. Utilities, incentives, which are generally thought of as tax abatements, higher education, there you go again, and quality of life. Okay, so this gets back to, this is the analysis that was put together back 2015, 2016. And essentially it's taken the data that's out there. And I want to be very clear, this is not hard and fast. This is guidance. This is data, being able to use data to kind of get you between the ditches. You need to talk to employers. You need to have sector councils. You need to do that kind of, you need to have those kind of exercises to get the employers to weigh in, but at least it keeps you between the ditches. The employers, the sector councils, those sort of things are what keep you on the road. Okay. And provide guidance on this one. So on the data side of things, companies belong to industries. Industries have a taxonomy called the NAICS classification system, the North American Industrial Classification System. The more digits, the more detail. It's a 6-digit taxonomy. So at the high level 2-digit, you know, there's manufacturing, there's healthcare, so it's broad. Workforce has the same thing. It's a standard occupational classifications or the Occupational Information Network. They're tied very close. Bureau of Labor Statistics, Department of Labor. That's the ones that put this together. The NAICS codes are put together by the Bureau of the Census. There's roughly 1,000 of them. It's tied to a company's production function. What do you do? And then occupationals, that talks about job descriptions. And there's issues with all of these, and I won't go into that, but at least it can help us do this. And then it ties back to the classification of instructional programs that comes out of iPads, okay, on the education side. You've got these taxonomies, these different ways of classifying these groups. And because we have so much data at the federal level, they can do crosswalks between them, right? So you got a machine shop, you have an idea how many machinists you're going to need, how many welders you're going to need, how many administrative assistants you're going to need. And so you can do this crosswalk so you can see once what occupations you're going to need. Then you can take those occupations, you can see what you're training for, and then you can see what you have and what you need, where you want to go, what are priorities, and work through it that way. So that's what I did on this side, because all of our target sectors are a collection of industries and NAICS codes. So I could take that back into it, do the crosswalks, and look at it this way. Okay. The other thing, but I didn't want it to be just about the target sectors, because we don't incentivize, we don't have target sectors in some areas like construction, right? But construction is really, really important to our economy. So I want to make sure that we include other elements. And so back in the day when I used to do a lot of forecasting, we always did consensus forecasts, taking in what the universities do, private consultants, because it would take out the bias that was inherent to any one person's forecast. And you would get a much more stable forecast that ended up always having a much more reliability and accuracy tied to it. So what I did here is I took this target sector approach, which I just talked about before, these crosswalks, and then we look at real-time job postings. What are employers looking for now? Okay, you know, and there's a whole bunch of data out there that helps us talk to that. I wanted to make sure we took care of our traditional and foundational industries. And so taking Dieter's occupational employment projections, because they take the past and they project it into the future. So that's going to cover construction. That's going to cover leisure and hospitality. That's going to cover mining. It's going to cover all of those. Okay. I added in there Brookings STEM score. They did a great study called the Hidden STEM Economy and looking at knowledge competencies, and brought that into here. We wanted to look at the JOLTS data, which is job openings and labor turnover survey. So that's new jobs due to growth and jobs replacement jobs due to worker turnover. So brought that in there. We wanted decent wages, and then we looked at an automation index. Okay, roll this all together because it's data that's provided regularly, consistently, and isn't enough there's enough size to make it reliable. Okay, and then we can update it. So anyways, this is where it ended up in the most recent release that we sent over into 2023. These are the 2023 numbers. And I said this was a taxonomy. On the occupation side, there's essentially 6 digits. They call it 5 digit, but the first 2 are tied together. This is at the 3-digit level. So there's roughly 800 different occupations that are identified by the Department of Labor. When we take it down to the 3 digits, so we could at least look at a high level how they all fell together. This is at the 3-digit level. So this is like the top. So there's 93 digit occupational groups. This is the top 30. And the point that I'm trying to make here is that at the top, there's a huge consistency about what's in demand. Healthcare, healthcare diagnosing and treating practitioners, health technology and technicians. Then you start getting into the installation, maintenance, and repair occupations. There's your computer occupations, Ken. There's the other production occupations. There's a lot of manufacturing. There's construction. There's excavation, and it's consistent that in the top, that there's your low-hanging fruit of focusing on, making sure that those bases are covered. I wanted to regionalize it because as you go down, you can see that there's a difference between our rural communities and what's at the top than our urban communities, right? And so that way, GBC, Great Basin Community College, they can think about things differently in Elko or Winnemucca, and Western Nevada can think differently, right, than what CSN or TMCC was thinking about, okay? Anyway, so this provides guidance. The other thing I thought I would do is to just show in this slide here. So 2023, there's the same list that was before, and there's the 2021 list. And I'm showing you this is because there isn't a huge shift in, between, we do these updates every other year. And people say, well, we're going to make this huge investment into programs that train for these occupations. What if all of a sudden it changes? Well, it's not going to change. It's still going to work. It's still going to be effective. There's still a place to do this. Okay. I wanted to show you this. The other thing is that when we get to the detail level, so this is all at the 3-digit. If you go all the way out to the 6-digit level, we can actually start, we can start talking about the number of specific jobs in an occupation. We can come up with a number of jobs that are above or below the national average. We can talk about earnings. We can talk about the entry level of education, and we can talk about work experience and on-the-job training. I had Katie send out the full list of all 800 in-demand occupations for the state, for Southern Nevada, for Northern Nevada, for Central Nevada, and for Northeastern Nevada. Okay, and so you've got all those in the PDF file, and they're all sorted on there. And I think Goins going to post them on their website as well, so that's available for folks to use as needed to say, let's see if this is what we should do. I mean, these boards are a lot of times responsible for figuring out how funding is disseminated and distributed, and you got a lot of players. This may be a tool that can help you decide whether it makes sense to do one over the other. Okay, that's what I'm trying to do, is help provide this and support, which in turn really makes a difference on economic development and diversification. Because again, it's a great workforce that attracts great companies. Okay. All right, this slide here, because we can at the detail level, if I look at the top 100 in-demand jobs, almost half of them, 46%, are in this middle skills space, somewhere between a high school diploma and a bachelor's degree on the education side. If I look at that cohort and go over to the next element in there, what is the on-the-job training for those jobs? 75%, or roughly 35 of the 100 top demand occupations, are looking for some level of work-based learning. Okay, and if I take that pie chart, put it on the left on this side, and then I break that 75%, there's 27% of them are wanting apprenticeships. Okay. And then on the red one there on the 4 or 5 o'clock side, that's short term on the job. So that's a month or less. Then you've got 43% on the moderate term on the job training. So job shadowing, internships, those sort of things. 43%, and then long-term, so a year or more, 20%. That's what that looks like there as far as, I mean, so again, it's not just education. Many times folks are looking for experience. And if you can work with companies to help provide that, that's why you have to have employer engagement in all of these conversations as you move forward here. So this is, I believe, yes, this is my final slide. And then I'm going to turn it over to Elaine to talk a little bit, unless there's questions on this one. So this bar chart, that's the same one that was before, where, roughly half of the top 100 in-demand occupations require this middle skill space. I just took and I just projected out to 2026 what it would look like for that, what we're expecting the growth to be in here. And the group we least want to see growth, so that's the no formal education, that's the one that's expected to grow the most. So at the end of the day, we're going to need to figure out how we're going to shift the fastest growing one to this middle skill space, and then at the same time, changing the downward trajectory. We need to continue to encourage into this space that helps grow the economy, creates opportunity, creates economic capacity, and creates resiliency in our economy. So I'm going to stop there because I think I've already talked way too long.
Thank you, Bob. Elaine?
Great. This is Elaine Silverstone for the record. Did you want to pause for a moment for questions to Bob before I give just a real concise overview of one way we're helping to meet that workforce need at GoEd?
Sure. Does anybody have any questions or comments for Bob?
Ta-da.
Seeing none, you're
Cool.
on.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Bob.
Great. So I'm going to take the screen then just to pull up, and I'm not doing this just because my colleague Greg is on the line, but a resource that I use regularly to communicate about workforce innovations for New Nevada Fund is through a press release that was, where's my share? Posted on June 29th, 2023. And this predates my arrival here at GoEd. Can you confirm if this page is shared? Whoop, not yet. I gotta hit share on Zoom. Great. Do you see that there's a GoEd press release page being shared?
Yes.
Yes.
Excellent. Great. So I was very fortunate to arrive to this office in September of this year, but a lot of great work has been done to support workforce efforts through the Workforce Innovations for New Nevada. And just to state what may be known to many of you on the call, this is a fund through legislation, which has very specific criteria for where it can be awarded. And that really speaks to some of the last slides and pieces of information that Bob was just bringing up. That is shorter term programs, on the job apprenticeships, for example, work-based learning through eligible training providers. In most cases, are community colleges. And so the reason I really like to highlight this particular press release is that each example really helps to illustrate that which is an element of an award for Workforce Innovations for New Nevada. So for example, I'm just going to scroll to, and I'm going to share this link in the chat box for anyone. These are awarded to those programs at our eligible training providers that have programs focused on our target sectors, partnered with employers in the region, and are meeting a particular minimum threshold that is usually based on an industry average. So again, for example, this first one, Truckee Meadows Community College received $715,000 award for their advanced manufacturing mobilization program. And over the course of the program, based on their approved budget, obviously, they're going to receive equipment, instructional capacity to meet a certain amount of students trained, and job placement outcomes are an important metric as well with industry partners. So I want to just make sure you have this, although I'm also happy to, wait, where's chat? This is my favorite tool, Greg, and I'm not just saying that. Did it send to all? Oh, it sent to everyone. There we go.
Yeah, and pardon me, this is Ken Evans for the record. If Katie gets it, she can distribute it to our members. Thank you.
Great. So this is a really, as I mentioned, a lot of this great work has been done in this particular, done before I arrived. In this particular legislative session, the WIN Fund has been appropriated $10 million, of which almost 2/3 of that has already been obligated to the programs that you would read about in this press release. And so there's an opportunity to continue to award funding to programs that are, again, aligned to the industry sectors, working with employee partners and tied to job outcomes. And in this way, the WIN Fund is really an economic development tool to help support business development. I love working with my team here in this office for that purpose. I'm gonna
This is
pause.
Hugh Anderson. If I
Yeah,
can
happy
interrupt
to
real
pause.
quickly, where in that first bullet point, where it says there are 5,560 jobs in this area, is that job openings or jobs that are currently occupied, but we expect greater growth in the future?
Sure. These are jobs that the employee partners committed to in letters of support as part of the application. So I could look more specifically to say how many Tesla suggested they have, Panasonic would have has, and Haas has in this particular application. Is very specific to their letters of support. They would have said, I have 1,000 jobs, I have 1,400 jobs, and I'm not doing near perfect math for you. But they would have been commitments from employers in the region in these sectors as part of a win application, so that these are jobs. Now, that doesn't mean that it's limited to just Tesla, Panasonic and Haas, of course, but we know that there's a workforce development need in the region.
Thank you.
And pardon me, this is Ken Evans for the record. So to build on what the chair just asked about, so I would assume via Owen, we'd have the ability to track how they're doing in terms of getting people to these programs and actually getting people placed. And then maybe the other thing I'd be interested in, again, in the interest of serving underserved populations, is paying attention to that factor as well.
Absolutely. Thank you. Those are certainly requirements for the application and metrics that are captured in quarterly reporting, raised up to annual reporting as well. And indeed, the diversity piece for outcomes is also a requirement for application and award. So just for one example, I just was reading a quarterly report as I'm receiving them, all targeted for January 15th, that the welding program out of Great Basin College, which I'll just scroll down for fun to this line bore welding program. They had highest enrollment that they've had, 18% increase of females in the program. They've made a point to include females in their marketing materials, and they feel that having a female instructor has also helped to attract females to the program. Does that get at the heart of your question?
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. And if you'll continue to scroll down, the only other thing I'd be interested in is, I'm seeing it now, Southern Nevada institutions as well. Thanks.
And again, these are just 10 active programs now. Certainly the WIN program predates my arrival. There's been about 40 awards I'm averaging right now, and about between $17 and $19 million funded in programs across the state during this time. And we do still have funding left. I'm happy to be promoting that right now, that we're excited to welcome applications for workforce programs that support training in the target sectors.
So this is Bob Potts. I'm going to weigh in real quick and help support Elaine on this one.
Thank
This program got started in 2015, so it's not very old to get that many dollars rolled out. It's been really great. And it's not only for specific training into target industries for the jobs that are guaranteed on the back end. This is really to stand up programs and can go on in perpetuity with multiple cohorts, right? So it feeds, once you get this going, then it rolls out where they can continue to train and help support other companies. Again, it's the workforce.
Thank you, Mr. Potts. That's great to know. Ken Evans for the record, because one of the briefings we got last meeting was on something similar that was being done in New Jersey. One, to get to the employers to do certain things, but then at the same time to leverage state resources to do it. So this is outstanding. Please continue.
Well, this Bob Potskin, I'm going to just stand up Elaine on this. She's just been a rock star since September. Please take whatever you see here, and if you can find an opportunity where we can leverage this, I can't. You couldn't find a better person to work with than Elaine. So.
Thanks so much. I'm really enjoying the engagement as well. And I can see from the names on some of the screens, I've had an opportunity to work or meet with so many of you. A great part of my work is becoming a subject matter expert for workforce development programs and needs across the state. And so I welcome conversations with those of you I've not yet met. And I encourage Katie to share my contact information. It's easily found otherwise. Another plug to my colleague Greg, who's on the phone, he wouldn't know, we're going to be launching a new website for GoEd, and we're going to really be helping to map the engagement with a WIN application on the new page as well. So in short time, I'll feel really excited to share that page as well with others. So just now while we were on the phone, by the way, I received on this call together, I just got an auto reminder that someone's just filled out an interest for a WIN application. So much of the engagement for how to get involved is through our webpage.
Ken Evans, for the record, and I am going to respect time. Very quickly, Ms. Silverstone, if there's a way, what I'd like to do is to have you present a subset of what you're doing at our barriers and underserved committees, because one of my concerns is making sure that there's access and awareness on the front end for programs like this, so that we can try to figure out how to connect, one, the underserved population, and then two, there's a disconnected youth program that's going on that I think needs to be aware of what you're doing as well.
Well, I'll be happy to join Brett on the call that you'll invite us both to share more information. Elaine Silverstone, for the record. Thanks so much for having me.
Elaine, this is Hugh Anderson. Two things. Number one, may we impose on you for any periodic updates to this data that you will be, I assume, summarizing and monitoring to see how funds are deployed, how many of the, for instance, the funding will assist 150 trainees in 2 years. So I assume you'll be monitoring that quarterly or what have you, and say we're up to 120 trainees, or we're only at 80 and we're looking to promote more. If we can impose on you for any kind of updates along those lines, that would be great. And then jumping over to Brett, I assume, and Milt, I assume both of you, your organizations are fully aware of these grant-funded programs, and as you're serving clients, you're driving the appropriate ones to these programs. Is that not correct?
This is Milt. I actually had a conversation with Bob around that. And yeah, that's accurate. I think that we're working towards better collaboration and sharing of that information, but I would say yes, generically.
Thank you.
And Brett Miller, for the record, WC works closely with CSN, which is the big one in the South for us here. So the answer is yes, at least to the degree that these courses are on our ETPL.
Well, Hugh Anderson, for the record, going back to Bob, one of the references in Bob Potts' slides, as we've discussed many times on these calls and in meetings, there are 3 Nevadas, and each one has unique demands and needs. And as a statewide board, we want to make sure that one of the challenges in the last few years in the United States especially has been a lack of mobility for workers. And for a Southern Nevada person to recognize that by driving a few hours north, they could have an extraordinary career and well-compensated job, albeit with all the housing shortages and other things you have to contend with. But nonetheless, we want to make sure that everybody in the state who's going through our programs recognizes that they don't have to look just in their zip code. We have a very vibrant state with a lot of things going on, and it's programs like this that we have to, going back to Ken's point, that we have to make sure are communicated far and wide. Because as you all know, what Jaime is always talking about, just that one cohort of 42,000 unengaged youth, just in Southern Nevada is only part of the iceberg. And we have to make sure that we start addressing that and getting these people jazzed about, getting to work in financially secure careers. Okay, soapbox put away. Any other questions for Elaine or Bob? Elaine, did you have anything else you wanted to add for your comments?
No, thank you so much. I'm glad to be here, as I said. Thanks.
We appreciate you joining us.
Give you back your screen. There you have it.
All right. So let's see, moving on to agenda item number 11 for discussion and information only. Nope. That was Brett. See, I am wrapping myself around the ankles. Moving on to agenda item number 12 for discussion and information only. I would like to see if there are any new business from the executive committee to bring before the committee. Does anybody have anything to add to the comments we've heard thus far? All right, seeing none. Before moving on, I request that any member of the executive committee who arrived late after roll call was taken to please identify yourself at this time so you are marked present. Katie, did anybody come in late?
Yeah, Scott, can you mark yourself present?
Yep. Scott Hammond, I was here.
Great,
I
thank
gotta
you.
hear from the doctor.
Thank you, Scott, and we expect to see a tardy note formally filed. But you weren't tardy, you just forgot to chime in.
No, I was trying to get everybody off the Wi-Fi to get on the Wi-Fi.
We have to, that goes back to Bob's reference to underinvested government apparatus, but that's another story. All right, so moving on to agenda item number 13, members of the public are invited for final comments. Anybody on the telephone or Zoom, Katie?
Not seeing any.
Thank you very much. Hearing no further comments, I hereby move to adjourn this meeting. I want to thank you all for your participation today. It was very helpful.